Oh my God, it's me. That's right. It's Kevin O'Sullivan. Who would have thought it? Good afternoon, and welcome to Drive Time, right here on Talk. I'm your host, Kevin O'Sullivan, coming at you a little earlier than usual, all the way to 7 o'clock. Stand by for 3 thrilling hours of news, views, and topical debate. Get involved, get it off your chest, and get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000, or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number. And if you keep it clean, I promise to play your message out. It's Friday, March the 7th. Here's what's coming up. Reform UK are in turmoil after one of its 5 MPs rounded on Nigel Farage and accused him of having a messiah complex. Rupert Lowe, the multi-millionaire member for Great Yarmouth, also declared that the right-leaning party was little more than a protest group. In an exclusive interview on Talk yesterday with Harry Cole, a clearly furious Farage hit back, snarling that without him, businessman Lowe wouldn't have stood, and I quote, a cat's chance in hell of winning his East Anglian seat. This bitter infighting is an ugly sight to behold. What the hell is going on? 0344 499 1000. In other news, the shocking decision by the unelected Sentencing Council to enshrine two-tier justice by instructing the courts to treat ethnic people, Muslims, trans people and all minorities more leniently than white British citizens looks increasingly like a secret Labour plot. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood is making all the right noises, voicing her alleged anger. But now it emerges that the sentencing quango was following recommendations by her cabinet crony David Lammy. Two-tier Keir has been presiding over unofficial two-tier justice since the blatant manipulation of the legal system amid the summer riots. Now, folks, it's official. Isn't that special? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, brilliant news. The police have cleared themselves of any wrongdoing in the outrageous harassment of Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. They called at her home on Remembrance Sunday morning, accused her of a hate crime she did not commit, and now they insist they were in the right. Hey, Rozzers. No, you were not. This was a disgraceful case of Stasi-style cop overreach. How much longer are we going to allow the old bill to mark their own homework? 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, the latest on the international drama as Donald Trump imposes his will on the world. Zelensky comes crawling to the peace table, and the pathetic Euro gang, including weak and woke Keir Starmer, go into panic mode as they realise horror of horrors. They're going to have to pay for their own defence. Starmer, of course, simpers that he's the bridge between Europe and America. Is he hell? 0344 499 1000. Plus, the NHS goes officially mad as it instructs staff to treat blokes with beards as women if they identify as female. How about this as an answer? No. And how about this for the men who wear dresses? If you want to be treated as a woman, shave your bloody beard off. 0344 499 1000. Also, hero centenarian Captain Tom Moore's awful daughter, Hannah Ingram Moore, says her fabulous father would be angry over the way she has been treated since it emerged that she ripped off the money he raised for charity. Hannah, no, he wouldn't. 0344 499 1000. He'd be furious, wouldn't he? And as the case against the late not-so-great Michael Jackson finally approaches its court date and 2 of his victims demand compensation after this so-called king of pop stole their childhoods, why is this obvious paedophile so revered to this day by millions? 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Friday Drive together. Now, right off the bat, lots to come in this first hour. In just a little while, we'll be discussing two-tier justice, This is now official in this country. If you're white, middle class, heterosexual, someone like me, you know, you could be a woman as well, you're in trouble. You're going to get much more strict sentences, much less lenient treatment by the courts than if you're ethnic, if you're a Muslim, if you're trans. That's good, isn't it? Let me know what you think about that. That's coming up. 03444991000. Also, the police marking their own homework, clearing themselves of their outrageous harassment of completely law-abiding Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. We'll talk about that in just a little while. And that absurdity at the NHS staff being instructed. So get these guys, you know, wear dresses, so I identify as a woman. OK, if you want to, fine, no problem. But some of them apparently, they want to be treated as a woman, but they keep their beards. Bit odd, you know. The NHS says even if they do keep their beards, you have to treat them as a woman. Well, as I just said, here's an idea. You want to be treated as a woman, maybe first step, right off the bat. Shave your beard off. Just a thought. 03444991000. But it's insane, isn't it? The NHS, the money it wastes on this woeful wokery, it's got to stop. But first, let's talk about reform and the spat that is making headlines and got fuelled yesterday when Nigel Farage appeared here at this very time last night with Harry Cole. We're going to go over to Ann Widdecombe, who is the spokesperson for Reform UK, former MEP for them, of course, and a former redoubtable Tory cabinet member. We'll talk to her in just a second. But just to remind you, Rupert Lowe gave an interview to the Daily Mail. He's the Reform member for Great Yarmouth, in which he said that he accused Nigel Farage, the leader, the charismatic leader, of having a messiah complex and leading what was little more than a protest group. It's extraordinary breaking of ranks. This was Nigel's response when he spoke to Harry Cole last night.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
To discuss this falling out, this dramatic falling out, a warm welcome to the show, one of my favourite guests. She's a spokesperson for Reform UK, as I just said, former Conservative Home Office Minister and, of course, an MEP for Reform, Ann Widdecombe. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
Well, your thoughts, I mean, if nothing else, the optics of this are poor. My thoughts, for what they're worth, is Reform UK is where it is now because of Nigel Farage. He is the charismatic leader of this party, the focus of this party, and without him, I don't think they would be where they are today. And they are in a position, I think, to march to glory. I really think that. But if members of their ranks, senior members of their ranks, keep breaking ranks like Nigel, Rupert Lowe has, that's going to be a problem. We do have a problem here, don't we?
I think we have much less of a problem than the picture you're painting. I think it is common ground that without Nigel Farage, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today. And indeed, I can recall Rupert at a conference when he was speaking, calling for the return of Nigel Farage as leader. And calling for it, despite the fact that we had an interim leader at the time. So I don't actually think the difference is that great, but I think I know what is going on. Rupert is very keen for a fast pace of realisation of all the things that the party has got to do in the transfer from being a party that was protesting about Brexit to being a party that now has a programme for Britain. Things like setting up branches, which we've done, over 400 of them, democratising the party, getting rid of the company and the shareholders model. We've done that. We're at the moment still finishing off our recruitment for candidates for the council elections. Now, we've had to do all of that, and it isn't possible to do everything at once. And Rupert is very keen, and I know this because I've talked to him, he's very keen for good policy development. So am I, so is Nigel, but we've got to do things in order of priority. And at the moment, the big priority has got to be the local council election. So I would say that these two men should sit down and should talk behind closed doors.
Yes, I was interviewed by Alex Phillips on her show earlier this morning, and I said if Nigel Farage wants my advice, I'm sure he doesn't, but if he does, I would organise some kind of display of unity pretty soon with him, Rupert Lowe, Richard Tice, maybe even yourself, some kind of event where you're all together and everybody can realise that you're still friends. Does Nigel Farage have a messiah complex?
No, I don't think he's got a messiah complex, but I think he's got a very, very clear recognition that it was his charisma which has taken us to where we are now. I mean, when you think, this time last year, no MPs and all the rest of it, and now we've got 5 MPs, we've got a membership that has overtaken the Conservatives, left them miles behind. We're now snapping at the heels of the Labour membership and will overtake them in due course. Everywhere you look, we're topping the polls. Everywhere you look, we're making huge advances. And that is down largely, not 100%, but very largely, to Nigel's charisma.
I made this analogy this morning to Alex. Ironically, kind of almost counterintuitively, to an extent, political parties shouldn't be democracies. They're like national newspapers. Newspapers are not democracies. They should be run by the editor. The editor makes the decisions and everybody else falls into line. And I think political parties, when they're running smoothly, should be the same. There's a lack of discipline.
Well, you want a dictator? You want a dictator?
Well, I think
that Nigel wants to be a dictator. I don't want him to be a dictator. I don't want dictators. I mean, I have seen how policy is made in parties, and the best policy is always made when you take expert advice, and by expert advice I mean sensible advice. You take sensible advice, you discuss it. In the course of the discussions, objections are raised. You explore those objections to see whether they're valid or not. That's how policy is made. That's what I want to see happen in reform. But I understand that, that's a job for after the local elections.
But so Ben Habib, he quit the party back in November, the end of November, saying Nigel Farage has too much power. Now you've got Rupert Lowe effectively saying the same thing. I mean, does he have too much power? I think it's quite good that he has a lot of power because he is the focus of the party. He is why people are drawn to the party. And I think people in the party should listen to him rather than breaking ranks like Rupert Lowe has. What are your thoughts about that? Does he have too much power?
No, I don't think he's got too much power. He is a powerful man, clearly. But I don't think he's got too much power. But I do believe, as I've just said, in a policy formation, by discussion, by exploration, by looking seriously at what objections there may be, because that's the only way you're prepared for any trouble. I do have 23 years long experience in Parliament, 7 of it at ministerial level and 3 of it at shadow cabinet level, senior shadow cabinet level. I do know how these things work, but as I say, unlike Ben Habib and unlike Rupert Lowe, I don't expect it to happen by tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I take that point. Now, another issue here. I suggested this morning, it was just speculation, but do you think that Rupert has been slightly, if not corrupted, swayed by that extraordinary endorsement by Elon Musk on X or Twitter or whatever it's called this week, where he said Nigel Farage hasn't got what it takes. Rupert Lowe seems like a fantastic guy. I haven't met him, but he's great. Now, that has resulted, and you might be interested to know, in Rupert Lowe having far greater reach on social media than Nigel Farage. So do you think that that endorsement by Elon Musk slightly went to Rupert's head?
Well, I sincerely hope not. And actually, if you look at the context in which that endorsement was made, Nigel had refused point blank to go along with Elon Musk and involve Tommy Robinson. and had said, there is no place for the likes of Tommy Robinson in reform. And that was what upset Elon Musk and caused him to say that Nigel, wasn't fit to lead the party. Well, Elon Musk, quite honestly, makes an absolute habit of speaking before he engages his brain. And that was one occasion.
Why did Nigel Farage say a few months back that if reform was in power, that they might consider allowing the ISIS bride terrorist Shamima Begum back into the country?
Well, I would take the opposite view and have...
Yeah, I do too.
have taken the opposite view for a long time. But there is a view, and it needs exploring again, but I don't hold it. There is a view that, there comes a time when she's paid the penalty. But all I can say is that if ever she does come back here, she comes back to go into prison, not to be a free citizen.
Yeah, well, I just think leave her in the desert. Now, will Rupert Lowe, in your view, remain within Reform UK? Will he stay being the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, or is there a possibility? I mean, giving this interview to the Daily Mail was an extraordinary thing to do. I mean, he's an intelligent man. He knew what he was doing. He's throwing a grenade into this party. Do you think he will stay within Reform UK or go independent?
Well, all I can say is what Nigel Farage said, because I hope so. And I do sincerely hope so, because, I rate Rupert immensely highly. I think he's a very clever chap. I think Reform owes him a huge amount. I think he's an extremely good campaigner, and other Reform candidates could learn from the way that he campaigns and uses social media. And so all I can say is, I hope so. I cannot speak for him.
Well, get on the phone to Nigel and Rupert and Richard Tice. I suggest you all go out for a drink and make sure the photographers are there. That's my advice. Great to talk to you, Anne, as always. Thank you so much. Ann Widdecombe there. We'll be back in a moment where we'll be talking about two-tier policing.
It is, and it's time for employers to get with the programme about this. We've had a series of court cases. NHS Fife versus Peggy is going on right now, in which tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money is being used to defend these insane cases where employers try to compel the speech of their employees. They don't have the right to do that. It's not kind and respectful to compel people's speech, and it's particularly dangerous for women and girls for whom sex recognition is really, really important.
Welcome back. Well, listen, if you're white, middle class, you know, you're a bloke, heterosexual like me, or a heterosexual white middle class woman, you're in trouble. Well, look, don't break the law, put it that way, because if you end up in court, they're going to throw the book at you. If, though, you're lucky enough to be an ethnic minority, a Muslim, a trans person, someone from a different culture, from abroad, yeah, you're in clover, because the Sentencing Council has officially said that you should get more lenient treatment. What is that about? I think it's going to throw the police into fury. Let's talk to former police officer Norman Brennan. Norman, welcome to the show. I mean, this is a sacred principle throughout your career as a copper. The sacred principle was, in the eyes of the law, no matter what colour, class or creed you are, everyone is equal. And yet Labour here seem to have thrown that away, thrown that into the bin, and now say if you're ethnic, if you're a Muslim, if you're trans, you get preferable treatment over, shall we say, traditional white British citizens. That's all wrong, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a very well-known saying that the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Can I just ask you one question, Kevin, before we kick off?
Yes.
You and I have each known each other for a number of years. I've done about 13,000 interviews in 35 years, including when I was a serving police officer, the only person in Britain, or the only serving officer ever, to be doing interviews. Nobody else did. The question I'm asking you this, can you tell me one interview where you and I have spoken on a law and order issue, where we're actually talking about what we can do to safeguard and protect victims and ensure that the public can live safely? Nearly every single interview, Kevin, is what we can do for the offender. What can we do to stop sending people to prison? And we seem to fiddle about around the peripheral. We never seem to get to the substance. And the substance is, Kevin, is what can we do for victims? What can we do to protect society? So in answer to your question, what are we talking about? We're talking about a criminal justice system. The pendulum of the criminal justice system swings to the left and swings to the right. It's called justice. It's called fairness. And justice and fairness must be just and fair to everybody, whether you're male, female, black or white. So why is it we are now picking ethnic minorities, women that are pregnant? Well, women that are pregnant anyway, Kevin, I can assure you, very few are ever sent to prison unless their crimes are so serious and so persistent that they need rightly punishing and society need protecting. The caveat to, say, for example, the ethnic minorities, why is it that they apparently go to prison for a bit longer than their white counterpart? Has anybody ever considered?
Well, they won't now because they're going to get special treatment. In fact, there's virtually a recommendation that you don't send them to prison, but you send white people to prison. I mean, that's what this is all about. I think this is a Labour plot. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, says, oh, she's really angry about this, and she's written to the Sentencing Council to register her displeasure. But now we've found out that actually the Sentencing Council was working on recommendations made by the Foreign Secretary, Shabana Mahmood's cabinet crony, David Lammy. Now, they're saying, oh, no, we don't want two-tier justice. The Sentencing Council has told magistrates, has told the courts to give special treatment to people from ethnic minorities, from ethnic religions, from Muslims, trans people, special treatment. Now, when you were a copper, you would not have liked that, would you? How does that make policemen feel?
Well, my point that I was just going to finish off with, Kevin, was this, is that if ethnic minorities, for example, in London, are sent to prison for a bit longer than their white counterpart, has anyone ever considered that the type of crime that young men and boys are committing are so serious that it's only right that they're punished and that they are given severe punitive punishments to punish them and deter others? But getting back to me being a police officer, I arrested white people, I arrested black people on a robbery squad, predominantly black offenders that committed very serious crime, normally armed or with a knife and with violence. and it's only right that they are sent to prison for the term that they're rightly given. Are they saying every magistrate and every judge in Britain is racist? Because that seems to be the answer to anybody and everybody that stands up and says certain sections of the community pose the most serious and violence towards society.
Yeah, well, what this is, Norman, they're saying that white people pose the biggest threat, and that people from the ethnic communities, ethnic backgrounds, should be treated more leniently.
No, I think what they're saying is...
No, that is what it's saying, Norman. That is what it's saying. It's written down by the Sentencing Council.
Yeah, I'll turn that on its head. What we're sort of saying is that they're saying that too many black people are sent to prison, for example, for too long. No, they're not sent to prison for too long. They're sent to prison for the right time. But what Lammy and these other Herberts are doing is they're carefully selecting the bits that suit them, almost no evidence whatsoever. And now we have got this absolute nonsense. And the whole of society, the British Police Service, every day they get up and they just wonder, what has happened to this once great country? The criminal justice system and the policing in Britain was renowned throughout the world to be the best in the world. And I'm afraid, Kevin, with stories like this, we're the laughing stock of the world. And I'm ashamed and embarrassed to see what the criminal justice system in Britain has become.
Norman, well said, well said. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. That's Norman Brennan, former police officer, tireless campaigner for law and order, works very hard for stabbing victims in particular. There he is. He's ashamed of our justice system. He's ashamed of it. And I think with this instruction, this black and white instruction in print, by the Sentencing Council to the courts, that we will have two-tier justice, that we will treat people from ethnic backgrounds, Muslims, gay people, trans people, people from different cultures, differently, more leniently than white British citizens. We should all be ashamed of our justice system. And remember this, I think this is a secret Labour plot, and Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood is crying crocodile tears. This is coming into play, folks, in the middle of, it's coming in April. She says she might try and get a law through to stop this. She's written to register her displeasure, but you know the way Parliament works. It works at a glacial place. She won't stop this. This will come in. David Lammy made the recommendations. Do we believe her? Do we believe her? Shabana, you're the government. Now, do something about this. If you really mean this, stop this. Do not allow it to happen, because you're in a position to do that. Don't tell us about registering your displeasure. Do something. Stop this. But guess what? Next up, we're going to be talking about more what you might call a kind of a two-tier justice. We're going to be talking about the way the police behave, this nonsense, this enforcement of non-crime hate incidents, knocking on people's doors, talking about how their behaviour might be of some concern. Oh, you made a tweet 4 months ago, a year ago, and that could be a hate crime. Stop doing this. We'll talk about that later. Welcome back. Now, let me know what you think about this. Something is going on here, right? The Sentencing Council got 17 people on it. They've come up that they are an independent quango, a quasi-autonomous non-government organisation. The translation of that is unelected. They've made this decision that ethnic communities, ethnic people, Muslims, trans people, gay people, people from different cultures abroad, foreigners, should get preferential treatment in the courts. In other words, someone like me, a sort of vaguely white, middle-class, middle-aged, heterosexual bloke, no chance. But if you're a trans Muslim, man, you're in clover. You're going to get great treatment. So what do you think about this? This is official two-tier justice. Keir Starmer has been presiding over two-tier justice unofficially ever since he came into power. That disgraceful manipulation of the legal system during the summer riots, the Southport riots, where all of a sudden, let's face it, magistrates and judges were doing exactly what the Prime Minister told them to, and these people were raced into court and they were in jail within about 5 days. Most people have to wait 2 years before they get to court. All of them given massive sentences, 3 years, 4 years, all this kind of thing. Housewives writing hurty words on Facebook, getting 3 years in jail. It was two-tier justice in all its lack of glory. Now the Sentencing Council has enshrined it. Made it official. Now, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, she says, oh, didn't know anything about it. I'm furious. I'm from an ethnic minority and I don't believe in two-tier justice. Well, one of her staff, one of her colleagues is on the Sentencing Committee. So do we believe her? Do we believe Shabana Mahmood that she didn't know? And now we understand that the Sentencing Council, if only in part, was operating on the recommendations of Shabana's cabinet crony, David Lammy, who also thinks that ethnic communities should be treated more leniently in the courts. So do we believe Labour? I don't think I do. I think this is a secret plot and they've been rumbled. What do you reckon? 0344 499 1000. Now, let's move on. We're going to talk still about law and order. I want to talk about over heavy-handed policing. But I might get a word first about what we've just been discussing. So a warm welcome to the show to the Associate Director of the Academy of Ideas, Alistair Donald. Welcome, Alistair.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. First up, can I get your thoughts on this, what in my view, outrageous enshrining of two-tier justice? That we now have a sentencing council, 17 people, not elected, not representing the people, a quango, you know, the Tony Blair system, you know, a kind of contract out government to people who aren't elected, so you get what you want. They are now saying that ethnic communities, people from ethnic backgrounds, ethnic cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, Muslims, trans people, gay people, should get preferential treatment in the courts, should be treated more leniently than perhaps people like you and I, traditional white, you know, male citizen, well, what traditional white British citizens. I mean, that's an outrage, isn't it?
Yeah, I think your previous guest said that we should be ashamed of the criminal justice system as it stands. And, you know, I've got sympathy for that. I think the word that springs to mind to describe it is perhaps arbitrary. And that's quite important, I think, because the one thing that you want from a rule of law, as it were, is for people to be treated equally before the law. I mean, that's the very principle of the law. And I think one of the problems of where we've been, the direction of travel over recent years has been away from that very important principle, where people are starting to be treated differently. And it's almost like you don't quite know where you stand before the law anymore, because a law should be a law. You should be able to read it if you're so minded to take that sort of depth of interest in it, but you should know where you stand in terms of how you behave in society. And increasingly, it seems to me that we're unable to discern what it is that will happen on the basis of often entirely legitimate actions, and the extent to which we'll be treated differently because of where we're born or what our ethnicity is or whatever it is that's the principle of that difference. So I think it's a real problem in general. And as you say, it's becoming very common now to talk about a two-tier system. It's applied in all sorts of different areas. And this spells real trouble for this government, because if we go down that road, then people will just lose trust and lose faith in some of the principal bedrocks of society. That's a problem.
Exactly right. This horror was alerted to Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary for the Tories, by a magistrate who received this instruction. You know, you've got to start going easy on ethnic communities. And the magistrate wrote to Robert Jenrick and said, this seems to me to be all wrong. Robert Jenrick made it public, came on to talk, and also spoke about it in the House. And the rest is history. I think that Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, really does have to do something about this. I'm just a bit worried that she's just saying all this and actually won't do anything. But let's move on, if you don't mind, Alistair, to the issue in case. Let's talk about Alison Pearson, my colleague and a friend of mine. She's the excellent columnist for the Daily Telegraph. Now, last Remembrance Sunday, quite early in the morning, she went down in her dressing gown, I do believe, around about 9:30 or something. Two coppers knocked on her door, basically to say, a bit worried about your behaviour. It looks like you may have tweeted something, you know, about a year ago, and, you know, this could be a hate crime, you know. And so, you know, they picked on the wrong person. You know, Alison is a formidable woman, and she raised merry hell. The police have had to admit that she didn't commit any crime, and this was thought police activity. This was the police acting like the Stasi. But you'll be thrilled to know, Alistair, that apparently the police were completely in the right. They didn't do anything wrong. Who says so? The police. They have investigated themselves, marked their own homework, and a report by the, wait for this is his title. He's a guy called Mark Hobra. This is his title. He is the lead for hate crime for the National Police Chiefs Council. The lead for hate crime for the National Police Chiefs Council. This country sounds more like North Korea every single day, doesn't it? Anyway, he has exonerated the Essex Police for their heavy-handed Stasi-style pursuit of a law-abiding prominent journalist. That is absolute garbage, and I think we've got to stop allowing the police to mark their own homework.
Yeah, marking their own homework, I think, describes it very well. And obviously, these investigations that are taking place, that are overseen and undertaken by the police to judge on the police, are obviously deeply satisfactory in terms of getting realistic answers to some of these things, which, I mean, broadly speaking, I think more rightly is a political discussion, actually. And certainly the police turning up at the home of a journalist is a very worrying development in society indeed, especially as they don't think it's a problem. I think one thing that's worth pointing out is that they turned up because they wanted to read her the charge of suspicion of stirring up racial hatred, which is a little bit more than just a kind of hate crime incident. That's an actual crime and a very serious charge that might have been put to her at that. So the fact that she was that was dismissed is obviously very good news. The fact that they wanted to record the incident subsequent to dropping the charge, nevertheless, is something that, although not criminal, was still a hate incident, again, is a kind of deeply worrying thing. And I think the concerns around non-crime hate incidents are absolutely well made. And it's interesting in this report, I thought, that one of the points that they make within the report was that they believe that it actually should have been a non-crime hate incident. They didn't give ground on that. They thought that even although there was no grounds to bring a prosecution on stirring up racial hatred, that it was all well and fine to keep Alison on file with this black mark against their name, as it were, and that could be called up at a later date and taken as proof that something of some description had happened in the past. Obviously, these things are so subjective in the way that people ascribe them as incidents that they're kind of meaningless often.
But they're happening a lot. I mean, I think there are some.
Yes,
they record something like 60,000 non-crime hate incidents every year. I think non-crime hate incidents are an absolute affront to a free democracy. They should not be recorded at all. If it's not a crime, what on earth are the police doing being involved in it? Unless we forget, Julie Bindel, the feminist writer, she got a similar call, knock on the door from the old Bill, and only a couple of weeks ago, a lady called, I think it's Helen Jones, a 55-year-old granny up in Stockport, who had registered her dismay over a local councillor who joined that guy Andrew Gwynn, you know, the disgraced health minister, joined in that WhatsApp group where they poured a bucket all over their constituents. Helen's put on Twitter, you know, this guy should go, he should resign. The police, 2 detectives knocked on her door and said, "What's your behaviour?" All of this is serious police overreach. Concentrate on crime, and if it's not a crime, it's none of your business, Mr. Bill, is it?
Yeah, I completely agree that these incidents, which they admit are not serious enough to be judged criminal and worthy of investigation, it's an absolute disgrace that these should be recorded and then held against people for the future, and sometimes, let's face it, ruining people's careers, because something like that on your file can prevent you from getting all sorts of jobs in the future. Yeah. And so they're very, very serious, and to my mind, they should be completely and utterly abandoned. Which, ironically, although she didn't go that far, Suella Braverman, a couple of years ago, when still in power, very much tried to take the government in the direction of moving towards diminishing the way that these hate crime incidents are used, and actually explicitly issued instructions to the College of Policing, who have the oversight of a lot of this stuff and write the guidance, that they needed to move towards a situation where these weren't, at the very least, so prevalent, and that they should be taken off the books, as it were. And that hasn't happened, which raises a serious question as to how the police are operating. I mean, on an individual level, I can sort of feel some sympathy for individual police, because they're subject to so much pressure and guidance from all sorts of places, whether it be in legislation or through the authorities that issue guidance. But there is to my mind, a distinct lack of clarity for the police in terms of when they are allowed to open an inquiry into something. I think there should be a very, very high standard set before the police can inquire into something that someone said. We should have a presumption of free speech in the country, and there should be a very, very serious almost incitement type offence before that can be
my problem, Alistair, here is I think the police enjoy this, hence they're completely ignoring Suella Braverman when she was Home Secretary's instructions about stop this non-crime hate incident nonsense, and this verdict on their own behaviour. Oh, we were not in the wrong knocking on Alison Pearson's door. Well, I'll tell you what, you were actually. And that's what I think is very disconcerting. There's a certain relish that the police take in this, and I think we have to remove this power that they seem to think they have of investigating people who have done nothing wrong. That's what Helen Jones said in Stockport. She said, well, what's my crime? They go, oh, you haven't committed a crime. We just want a word with you. Well, if she hasn't committed a crime, go and find a proper crime to solve. That's my idea. Alistair, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Alistair Donald there, Associate Director of the Academy of Ideas. What do you think? What do you think? Do you want a copper? Look, Alison Pearson, Julie Bindel, even Helen Jones, who can stick up for herself. Most people, 60,000 people a year get these visits. get these non-crime haters and knocks on the door. For a lot of people, it's really traumatising, and the police have got to stop it. What do you think? Don't you think they should? 0344 499 1000. Next up, a bit of a change of pace. We're going to talk about trans women in the NHS with beards. Stay tuned for that.
Russia has interfered with the elections of the countries that were not at war, right? We have seen it, even the United States. So the risks that if for some reason, somehow, technically, we would be able to conduct some elections, the risk that Russia will influence it is huge. And again, like, why should we? Ukraine is very good in telling our presidents if they're not performing well. We had revolutions, right? So it's up to Ukrainian people to tell our president if he's not working well for Ukrainian people.
Welcome back. Ben Habib, who used to be the deputy leader of Reform UK, you may remember he sort of sensationally quit the party last November, voicing similar concerns to those which have been voiced now by Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe says Nigel Farage has got a messiah complex. Ben Habib thought that Nigel Farage had way too much power, and that power threatened the democracy of the party. So Ben Habib will join us after the 5 o'clock news to give us his view on what's going on now. Now, before then, though, let's talk about the NHS, if we must. Let's go over to the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, Fiona McKenna. Hello, Fiona.
Hi, Kevin.
Well, what are we going to do about the NHS, Fiona? I mean, this is this is the moment where it officially goes mad. Staff have now been ordered, this is in NHS Scotland, but you can rest assured this will go national, that if trans women, men who wear dresses and who want to be treated as females, have beards, you still have to treat them as females. Now, my suggestion was, excuse the language, if you want to be treated as a female, maybe, you know, an initial sensible step might be to shave your bloody beard off. That might be a start, mightn't it? But this is nonsense. They talk about the fictional case of Lucy, a 29-year-old trans nurse. She has yet to formally change her name from Lee, but she's still producing visible facial hair. You have to call her Lucy because that's what she wants to be. They're ordering the staff, instructing the staff to use the chosen names and pronouns of transgender co-workers. These are instructions. Now, you know, I would probably go along with that. Don't want to upset these people. But if I didn't want to, if I wanted to say, well, Lucy, as far as I'm concerned, you're still Lee, especially since you're still sporting that beard, and I'm not going to use your pronoun, I'm going to call you Mr. That is an issue of free speech. I can if I want, can't I?
Well, these people are being told in training, in NHS training, that this is how they must behave. And it's hard to know where to start with this because this is our health service. And yet the thing they're training people on is to pretend that a man is a woman and to use the wrong pronouns, potentially even to lie to patients. Because if a vulnerable person is saying, I want a woman to treat me, and Lee/Lucy turns up, the staff are not allowed to say, that's a man. They have to say, here's Lucy, she's here to look after you. I mean, you really have to wonder about their priorities if this is what they think good training looks like.
You ladies at Sex Matters do great work. I would suggest that one of the ground zero problems that you face on a day-to-day basis is the NHS. The NHS enshrines all of this crazy trans extremism day in, day out, like this new guidance, like the fact that if I go for an X-ray, I have to answer the question, am I or am I not pregnant? I have to. That is NHS policy. If I refuse to answer it, I will not be given an X-ray. The NHS is stark staring mad when it comes to this claptrap, isn't it?
Well, what we're seeing here, yes, and those are good examples, is a dedicated effort by activists to take the idea of biological sex, male and female, out of the system. That's why they don't want men's and women's toilets. That's why they want to pretend that Lucy with a beard is a woman, if that's what Lucy says. And that's why, you know, they want to ask you if you might be pregnant. And it's just an eroding of a fundamental human reality. You know, we can be polite to each other without having to lie to one another and without having to discomfort other people. Nobody wants gender neutral toilets. And frankly, nobody wants Lucy with a beard in the women's toilets. And Lucy might want it, but other people have rights too.
All I can say is thank God Lucy's fictional, but you can rest assured there's probably a few real life Lucys strutting the corridors of the NHS. You know, West Streeting, the health secretary who won't fix the broken NHS, but like all health secretaries, pretends that he will. He says he's declaring war on this kind of weird wokery, this woeful wokery. Yet he allows this to carry on, that people like me still have to be asked whether or not we're pregnant before we get an X-ray. And by the way, official NHS policy, your thoughts on this, Fiona, is still to call pregnant mothers birthing people. The word mother or woman or female seems to be outlawed in the NHS. Your thoughts?
Well, I think this shows you how difficult it is to root out this kind of nonsense when it's taken root. The NHS is very decentralised. There are all kinds of different NHS trusts, some doing sensible things, some doing crazy things. I think we probably don't know the half of it. And it's going to take a very concerted effort by the Secretary of State for Health and whoever takes over as chief executive of NHS England to change what's going on. NHS Scotland should be easier to change because it's one single entity. But, you know, unless the government in Scotland wants to do that, that's not going to change either. So I'm afraid we're in this for the long haul because there's an awful lot of stuff to undo. It's
kind of strange, isn't it, that the NHS, you know, where doctors and nurses and medically qualified people work, this is the place where they refuse to accept biology. They refuse to accept scientific facts. That's supposed to be their business. Why is it happening in the NHS?
Well, I think it's a small number of activists, some of them in very influential positions, who are dictating this kind of stuff. You know, we hear from doctors, nurses, other members of staff in the NHS who do not want to go along with this, who want to give patients the right care, who don't want to lie to them or mislead them that a man is a woman. But they have to be very careful because they've been told that policy is that they must treat their trans-identifying colleagues as they want to be treated. So that just creates an extra level of tension in the organisation, as if they haven't got enough to worry about. But, you know, we've had a clear message from the top. Let's see now if that will filter through.
Yeah, well, West Streeting wrote a kind of searing article in The Sun about 3 weeks ago. Nothing yet. I wouldn't count your chickens, Fiona, but you never know. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you. Fiona McAnena there, the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. As I said, when we come back, Ben Habib, who quit Reform UK, feeling that Nigel Farage had too much power. We'll get his thoughts on the fact that Rupert Lowe, current MP for Reform UK, seems to feel the same. Has Nigel Farage got a messiah complex? That next. Stay tuned. Much still to come. This is Drive. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan. Welcome back. Don't forget, get your phone calls in. The big topics of the day is Reform UK falling apart at the seams. We're going to be talking about that in just a second with Ben Habib, a former member of that party. Also, we're going to talk about America, of course, or the latest really on this international drama that unfolds almost by the minute, involving, of course, America, Russia, Ukraine, America and Russia, or rather America and Ukraine, heading for Saudi Arabia on Monday, where Zelensky is basically going to eat humble pie and sign off this mineral deal and do everything that President Trump wants. Meanwhile, the Europeans are meeting, pretending that they're a big, powerful force as well. Keir Starmer continuing to make out like on the bridge between Europe and America. No, you're not, mate. Don't be a joke. Oh, you are a joke. So your thoughts on that? Two-tier justice. Two-tier justice, it's now official. If you're from an ethnic community, an ethnic background, Muslim, trans, whatever, you're going to get better treatment, more lenient treatment in the courts than, shall we say, traditional white British citizens. What do you think about that? 03444991000. We'll be taking your calls in about half an hour, by the way, so get your calls in, 03444991000. You can leave a WhatsApp voice note if you like on the same number. We'll play that out, or you can just send us a text. But it's good to talk on talk, so get on the phone, give me a ring. Now, let's get to business now. If you remember, Ben Habib, who was previously the deputy leader of Reform UK, he quit the party fearing that Nigel Farage had too much power, which threatened the democracy of Reform UK. That was back in November. Rupert Lowe, the MP, the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, seems now to have voiced the same concerns in a very public way in an interview in the Daily Mail. Before we go on to Ben, he's waiting in the wings patiently. Let's remind ourselves of what happened when Nigel Farage came onto this very show yesterday and spoke to my colleague from The Sun, Harry Cole. Take a look at this.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
Well, let me know. Ben's going to come on in a minute. Now, this is TV Verite. This is happening as we speak. I'm just being told that Reform UK have released an explosive statement. So let's go to Ben Habib, who's waiting on the phone. I think he knows more about it than me. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Good evening, Kevin. Good to see you. Perhaps not in the best of circumstances, but here we are.
Before I get this statement, I know you've been briefed on it. I'm going to get it in a second. Let's just talk generally. You left the party at the end of November, last November, fearing that Nigel Farage had too much power and that threatened the democracy of Reform UK. Well, Rupert Lowe, in an extraordinary interview in the Daily Mail, has pretty much said the same thing. In fact, he's gone a step further and accused Nigel Farage of having a messiah complex. He also says that Reform UK has sort of dwindled into nothing more or little more than a protest party. So he's had a real go at Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of this statement, your thoughts generally on the fact that Rupert Lowe seems to have echoed your sentiments back in November.
So a couple of things, if I may. The first is that when you talk about Reform UK being a protest party, what Rupert was referring to was not that they simply sit around protesting. What he was referring to was that Reform hadn't gone from being the insurgent calling out the uniparty of the Tories and the Labour Party, you know, who had delivered this country into the danger in which we now find ourselves. You know, Reform has to go from being that party that calls out the uniparty to a party that has the answers for all of that. It's no good just calling out the Tories and the Labour Party. You've got to have the policies, you've got to have the vision, you've got to have the aim, and you've got to demonstrate that you have the ability to deliver it. And that's what Rupert meant, that Reform UK seemingly can't make the leap from being the identifier of all the problems to a party with all the solutions. And unless you have the solutions, you can't be seen as a credible government. You need the solution, you need the people who can deliver the solution, and actually you need one more thing which has been absent from all the media commentary that I've heard so far. You actually need draft legislation ready to go by 2029.
Yeah.
So the task for Reform UK, and indeed any right-wing party that wishes to deliver the country away from the precipice to which it's been delivered over the last 30 years of really awful governance, is to get into a majority position in Parliament, have the people who can make the arguments clearly, have the policies that will deliver the solution, and then have the legislation that will enable the country to be saved. And all of that requires massive planning now, massive application. There's no point being on the airwaves all the time having razzmatazz conferences where you can do all of that. Yeah. You can have razzmatazz conferences, you can have fireworks, you can beat that drum, you can say everything the people want to hear, but behind the scenes, you've got to be developing a machine that can act in government.
Point taken. Point taken, Ben, but we have to get to this extraordinary statement now. I know you've been briefed on it. So it was a fairly ugly picture emerging as Rupert Lowe accused Nigel Farage of having a messiah complex. It gets worse. This is terrible. Bear with me. I know you know about this. I'm going to read this entire statement out. This is explosive. This is absolutely extraordinary. This is a statement from Reform UK Chairman Zia Yousaf and Reform UK's Chief Whip Lee Anderson, the MP. Bear with me, Ben. It is with regret that we feel obligated to disclose that the party received complaints from 2 female employees about serious bullying in the offices of the Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe. One worked in his parliamentary office, the other in his constituency office. We understand complaints have been made to the parliamentary authorities. Evidence was provided to us of workplace bullying, the targeting of female staff who raised concerns, the evidence of derogatory and discriminatory remarks made about women, including reference to a perceived disability. We feel we have a duty of care to all our staff, whether employed directly or indirectly. Accordingly, we appointed an independent King's Counsel to conduct an investigation into the veracity of these complaints. To date, Mr. Lowe has yet to cooperate with this investigation. In addition to these allegations of a disturbing pattern of behaviour, Mr. Lowe has on at least 2 occasions made threats of physical violence against our party chairman. Accordingly, this matter is with the police. Reform stands for the highest standards of conduct in public life, and we will apply these standards without fear or favour, including within our own party. Your thoughts?
Well, that is, I'm afraid, that is a declaration of war on Rupert Lowe. I don't know the circumstances to which they refer, but I am 99% certain it's all trumped-up nonsense. They talk about high qualities of standard in public discourse. Lee Anderson, in response to a perfectly civil tweet from me the other day, absolutely went for me in an ad hominem way on Twitter, which is frankly unforgivable, in my view, for any MP to act that way. People around Nigel Farage people
Are you
who
saying,
are close to Nigel Farage travel with... Yeah.
Are you saying here, I mean, by the way, I should stress, we have reached out to Rupert Lowe for his response, which is, of course, the right and proper thing to do. We haven't heard back from him now. Are you saying that this is just low politics, that this is a tactic to put Rupert Lowe in disgrace and to undermine what he said about Nigel Farage?
I'm very, very sorry to hear it. The right response from Nigel Farage, from Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson to Rupert Lowe's absolutely correct criticism would have been to talk to Rupert, embrace his criticism, understand it, and try and address it. The reason Rupert went public is because there is no mechanism privately in the party to be heard by the leader, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, for all his protestations to the contrary, has not introduced any forms of checks and balances or democratization in the party. He has his lapdogs, who are Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson. They do his bidding, and they've gone after Rupert Lowe because Rupert Lowe had the courage to speak up. This is a great tragedy, by the way, for Reform UK, a great tragedy, therefore, for the country, because the country needed Reform UK to become the party that would save it from the precipice on which we now stand and which we started this interview on. But actually what Reform has just done is what it's done, by the way, with hundreds of grassroots supporters of Reform across the country, people with whom I stood shoulder to shoulder, people who put this party on the map, who took it from 1% in the polls to 16% in the polls when the general election was called. And during that period, let me remind listeners that Nigel Farage was busy making money on GB News. He was not part of Reform UK. He was enriching himself while we built the party. The grassroots that built this party under Richard Tice, including with my leadership and with Rupert Lowe at my side, and the hundreds of people who now have been set aside by the party, often with the kind of complaints of, in my view, almost certainly trumped up in order to get rid of them. I don't know what Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson think they're doing. I don't know what Nigel thinks he's doing, but ultimately their actions are going to result in Reform UK being destroyed. And that will be a tragedy, obviously, for Reform UK. It'll be a tragedy for all the people who voted for Reform UK. But the critical point is this: it will be a tragedy for the United Kingdom, because we need a party that believes in this country, has the wherewithal to put aside egos, to put aside who it is that Nigel Farage is, messianic or otherwise, and can create a body of people who will speak up unashamedly for what is right to be said for saving the United Kingdom, protecting it, and celebrating that which is British. And I'm afraid, just listening to that, you said that I heard this statement before. I hadn't. The first time I heard it, Kevin, was you reading out right now. And what it says to me is Reform UK is not going to be able to bring this country away from the precipice on which we now stand. Nigel either needs to sack Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson if they made that decision on their own, or he needs to face up to absolutely poor decision-making in the face of legitimate criticism from Rupert Lowe.
So you believe that this is classic dirty politics, that Rupert Lowe has voiced his concerns about the direction of the party, about Nigel Farage's alleged Messiah complex, and, of course, the fact that he believes Reform UK is little more than a protest party. And in response, you believe that this may well be, and that neither of us can know, of course, that this may well be just trumped up in order to undermine Rupert Lowe and destroy his, or in an attempt to destroy his credibility.
Kevin, I have watched hundreds of people with whom I have campaigned who put this party on the map while Nigel was nowhere to be seen, set aside by the same kind of accusations. Sort of kangaroo courts that Reform UK has set up to cross-question, not even cross-question. They don't even cross-question. They make accusations, they decide someone's unfit to stand for office, they dismiss them. Hundreds of good people have been set aside by Reform UK. It doesn't make the news because none of these people have a public profile. They're the grassroots. They're the people who put the party on the map. They've been set aside by Zia Youssef and others. and under the leadership of Nigel. Nigel has a choice. This is actually a watershed. It's suddenly become a watershed for Reform UK. It didn't have to be this way, but Nigel has made it this way. He has a choice. Is he going to stand up for the United Kingdom, for the people of this country and the grassroots and the movement that created Reform UK and put him into office? Is he going to stand up for them? Or is he going to take some kind of politically expedient route that puts him at the center of attention all the time, but fails to deliver the country from the precipice on which it now stands? He's got those two choices.
Do you believe, Ben?
Yeah.
Do you believe, Ben, you alluded to this earlier, do you believe we may be witnessing right now the unravelling of Reform UK, perhaps the end of a dream?
I do. I think we are witnessing it. And Kevin, you know, I've been banging this drum for fear of what would happen. I've been saying from the beginning, the party needs democratization. And by the way, by democratization, I don't mean everyone having a say in what goes on. Obviously, you need a leader. You need a strong leader, but you need mechanisms in place by which people in the party, particularly senior members of the party, can be heard and to have a fair hearing and to have a debate. As I understand it, Nigel and Rupert haven't even spoken since the Daily Mail article was published. Nigel should have been straight on the phone to Rupert, saying, what the devil is this all about? We need to have a chat. They haven't even spoken. All of this takes place behind closed doors, and none of this is healthy. So I think that either Reform needs to grow up and stop acting like a prickly adolescent, and if it wishes to be a government, it does need to do what Rupert said, which is create a broad base of people, deep-thinking, capable individuals who understand what needs to be done to save the country and can deliver the country from the precipice on which it now stands. And Reform UK seems to me to be what I've just said, a prickly adolescent unable to rise to the challenge.
And last question, Ben, thanks so much for your time. As I say, this happened literally as you were going to come on and talk in more general terms about this. But does Nigel Farage, in your view, have a messiah complex?
The clip that you played with Harry Cole, a number of times during that clip, I just heard the word I, repeatedly, I. There wouldn't be any MPs if I hadn't come back. Let me just tell you this, Nigel. When the party went from 1% in the polls to 16% in the polls on the day that the general election was called, you were nowhere to be seen. It was put there by many of the people you have now set aside. It was put there by people like Rupert Lowe, Richard Tice, myself, David Bull, and others. You were not there. And the five MPs we got because of the position in which the party was on the day that the general election was called. And on that day, let me just remind you, Nigel, on the day that the general election was called, you actually said two things. You said the American election was more important than the British election, so you weren't going to be standing. And that undermined our press conference. The beginning of the general election campaign was undermined by your tweet an hour beforehand saying that you weren't going to stand in the forthcoming general election. By the end of the same day, you said you would stand, but for the fact that there were only 6 weeks in which the general election campaign was to be fought, and it was incapable of being won. And now you say that we wouldn't have got the 5 seats if you hadn't come back. I say, tosh. We would have got the 5 seats, irrespective of whether or not you came back to Reform UK. People put the party on the map, and it's those people who deserve the gratitude for the 5 MPs that we now have in Parliament. And it forced you, Nigel, to hold the party together, to hold the movement together, not to behave like an adolescent pricker, and actually respond to Rupert Lowe's reasonable criticism, embrace him, take him back into the fold, have a proper discussion man to man, and sort this out. It's up to you, Nigel. That's leadership.
Ben, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. That was Ben Habib, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Absolutely explosive developments, just as Ben was coming on. He didn't know about this. I didn't know about this. Now, Reform UK, the chairman, Zia Youssef, saying that the police are now investigating after he accused Rupert Lowe, the MP, the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, of making physical threats against him. They also are accusing Rupert Lowe of serious bullying in his offices in Parliament, that female staff were allegedly targeted, that derogatory and discriminatory remarks were made about women by Rupert Lowe. These are allegations. Rupert Lowe has yet to respond, but including apparently a reference to a perceived disability. So this is just astonishing. And as Ben Habib just said, I really hope it's not the case, but are we now, literally right now, witnessing the end of the Reform UK dream? Is Reform UK unravelling before our very eyes? Ben Habib said that this statement, he believes that is low politics, just trying to undermine Rupert Lowe with these very serious, basically criminal allegations against him. We need Mr. Lowe to respond, but you know, either these are true or this is very low politics, and possibly this is the end of the line for Reform UK. Absolutely astonishing. When we come back, we're going to stick with this story. Peter Cardwell will join me. We'll take some of your calls as well. What do you think? 03444991000. Stay tuned.
I think the most cautious estimates would suggest 2 months. I've seen other estimates suggest Ukraine can fight at least 6 months. One of the last things Joe Biden did before leaving office was to send through a huge tranche of military aid. So Ukraine is stocked up, but not all weapons are equal.
Yes.
Clearly. And some of the most valuable, precious, high-tech stuff is what they'll run low on first. And the most obvious thing is Patriot missiles. Patriot missiles defend places like Kyiv, where I'm talking to you now.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, sensational developments on the Reform UK front. Rupert Lowe, the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, who a couple of days ago gave a bombshell interview to the Daily Mail, accusing the leader, Nigel Farage, of a messiah complex and dismissing Reform UK as not much more than a protest group, now stands accused by Reform UK of serious bullying in the offices, in his office at Parliament and at his constituency office. We understand Reform UK understand complaints have been made to the parliamentary authorities. Evidence has been provided to Reform UK, they say, of Rupert Lowe targeting female staff who raised concerns. Evidence, they say, of derogatory and discriminatory remarks about women, including one reference to a perceived disability. Also, they have appointed an independent King's Counsel to investigate the veracity of these complaints. We have reached out to Rupert Lowe. I have to stress, these are allegations. And we need to hear Mr. Lowe's side of the story. Reform UK accuse him of a disturbing pattern of behaviour, and they say that on at least two occasions, he's made threats of physical violence against party chairman Zia Yousaf, and that matter has been referred to the police, so the police may well be investigating him. Joining me now is Talk's political guru, Peter Cardwell. Well, have you ever seen anything like this?
This is really fascinating. The timing, the wording.
Fascinating, that's one word.
Well, it's one word, explosive. The timing, the wording, and who it's from. Who is it from? It's not from Nigel Farage, it's from the chairman, Zia Yousaf. It's from the chief whip, Lee Anderson, both very close to Nigel Farage, particularly Zia Yousaf, who was brought in, of course, to professionalise the party. And look at the allegations. You can't really get much more serious than this. We've got alleged physical threats, two alleged physical threats against Zia Yousaf. You've got a King's Counsel investigation. You've got alleged workplace bullying, female staff involved, derogatory and discriminatory remarks made about women, including a reference to a perceived disability. This is an absolute rocket. This is a clear message to Rupert Lowe, and the message is: sit down, shut up, be quiet, do what we tell you. I don't think he's going to. It'll be fascinating to see what his response is, and also if the question, I think, for Reform UK as well is, if these allegations are what you say they are, and if you're so sure about them that you're instructing an independent King's Counsel, the next obvious question is, why have you not temporarily suspended the whip from Rupert Lowe? So he'd still be a member of Reform UK, but he wouldn't be within their parliamentary grouping. You've got to remember, this is a party that got 4.1 million votes, 600,000 more than the Lib Dems, but also they only have 5 MPs. 4 of them are huge personalities. You got Rupert Lowe, you've got Nigel Farage, you've got Richard Tice and Lee Anderson. Something like this was probably always going to happen, but in such a dramatic fashion and off the back of the criticism of Nigel Farage, well, that's really interesting, and I think it shows a real problem within Reform UK.
It certainly does, and Ben Habib, he found out at the same time as me. He was just about to come on at 5 o'clock. This statement came out, and he dismissed this. I mean, neither he nor we can know the veracity of any of this, but Ben said, as far as he was concerned, this smacked of classic Lowe politics, trying to undermine Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe after he criticised the party. He said this is classic Nigel Farage, demeaning and demonising an opponent, if you like. But I mean, I take Ben's point. The timing is interesting, but these are very serious allegations.
They are, but also I think Ben Habib probably has a point in terms of saying, why didn't this come out on Monday? Why didn't this come out on Tuesday? Yeah. Was this a matter of you knew about all this stuff earlier in the week? You know, all of this did not just emerge today or within the last 24 hours, 48 hours since Rupert Lowe gave that interview to the Daily Mail. If you're instructing an independent King's Counsel, that doesn't happen in one afternoon. Perhaps some of this has happened since Rupert Lowe made those remarks about Nigel Farage in the Daily Mail, but I'd be very surprised if that happens. Also, why are you necessarily making them public, and why now? Well, a cynic would say that it's because they want to get back at Rupert Lowe. Ben Habib is certainly a cynic about Reform UK. I'm sure he won't mind me talking about him in those terms, given the treatment that he's had, former deputy leader who was kicked out.
Did you hear it? He was furious.
He was furious. He was furious.
He directed the last part of his interview with me to Nigel himself. Just say you. Blah, blah, blah. I mean,
we'll look at this. It's very, very interesting because you have Reform that was doing well, but not brilliantly before Nigel Farage takes over. He comes in, he is the star, there's no doubt about that, but right throughout Nigel Farage's career, in UKIP, in the Brexit Party, now in Reform UK, questions about his leadership, his management style, they have followed him throughout this time. Look at UKIP. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like half of all UKIP MPs ever elected have not been a UKIP MP by the time MEP, I should say, in the European Parliament by the end of that time. It's fascinating thinking about this, seeing about Nigel Farage's management style here, the allegations made by Rupert Lowe, and the counter-allegations, which are much more serious. I mean, saying someone has a messiah complex, that's not a good thing in politics to say, but alleging...
I've got one of those.
Well, you are the messiah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much, Peter.
I mean, you have a messiah complex because you are the messiah. But no, much more seriously, if evidence has been given to them in regard to workplace bullying, the targeting of female staff who raised concerns even for blowing the whistle, evidence of derogatory and discriminatory remarks, all of that is very serious. It could sink a political career very, very easily, and it'll be fascinating to see how Rupert Lowe responds to all of this.
Ben Habib also declared in no uncertain terms that he believes this is the end of the dream, the end of the road for Reform UK.
I'm not sure that's the case.
And that they are unravelling, but might it be the time for Nigel Farage and the rest of the gang to seriously consider a merging of the right to actually talk to the Tories, because it's going to be hard for them to come back from this.
Let's have a look at this from Nigel Farage's perspective, all right? Let's just zoom out a little bit here. Reform UK, in a sort of poll of polls, all the polls that are out at the moment, if a general election were to happen tomorrow, they're at more than a quarter of the vote, 25.8%. Labour got their majority with about 33%. So if there were an election held tomorrow, the prediction is that Reform UK would get 192 seats. That was not the case a year ago. That was not the case 2 years ago. And I think if you're Nigel Farage, you say, look what I've done with this party. Look how I've come back in, I've brought it up. We've got 5 MPs, got 4.1 million votes, 600,000 more than the Liberal Democrats. Yes, there's a professionalisation, there's a job to do. He's brought in his guy, Zia Youssef, and he says, Zia, off you go and do it. Now, the question is, how do they do that? If you're going to make an omelette, you're going to break some serious eggs, and in Reform, there are some very fragile eggs. One of them, you might argue, is someone like Rupert Lowe. I would argue that actually 4 of the 5 MPs that Reform UK have, they're all big personalities. They've all got big egos. That helps
except for that one.
Well, except for James McMurdoch.
One can never remember.
Yes, exactly. Although there are questions about him as well. Well, there are. He has an assault conviction. Anyway, the point in regard to this is Nigel Farage may well say, look at what I've done. Look at the great things I've done. We don't actually, the easiest way to do this is to continue going on with what I've done. Rupert Lowe is someone who's causing trouble. Let's just cut him loose. We'll have an inquiry, we'll see what happens, and we'll kick him out of the party.
Yeah, but I suspect there's going to be a lot of trouble ahead. I mean, this is catastrophic for Reform UK, and I think catastrophic for a lot of Reform UK supporters, Nigel Farage followers. I mean, I studiously don't support any party, but I've enjoyed the Reform project. I think it's exciting. I thought they were on the road to glory, and this is a serious derailment. Very disappointing for fans of Farage and for supporters of Reform UK who thought they may even stand a chance of forming the next government. So I'd like to hear from you. If you're a Reform UK supporter, or for that matter, a Reform UK opponent, let me know what you think about this sensational development that we've been talking about now for the best part of 40 minutes. 0344 499 1000. Your calls when we come back. Welcome back. You've heard about what's happened. Sensational developments. The Reform UK party now accuse Rupert Lowe, their MP for Great Yarmouth, of serious misbehaviour, alleged offences against women, alleged violence, threats against the chairman, Zia Youssef. Is Reform UK unravelling before our very eyes? That's the question. I asked you what you think. Let's go to the phones. First of all, it's Andrew in Halifax. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Kevin.
Yeah, what are your feelings about what you've heard in the last half an hour or so?
Absolutely beside myself with despondency, really.
Yeah.
I was a lifelong Tory voter. I voted Reform at the last election. I had such high hopes for them. I blame both sides for this. I blame Rupert Lowe because he aired those grievances in public when they should be been behind closed doors. And I'm against, if this turns out to be some sort of vengeance act, then I'm bitterly against that as well.
Yeah, it's got the feeling of that, hasn't it? Now, these are very serious allegations that have to be taken seriously, but the timing of them, following this interview that Rupert Lowe gave to the Daily Mail, suggesting that Nigel Farage had a messiah complex and the party wasn't going anywhere, and then all of a sudden you get these really undermining, explosive allegations against Rupert Lowe. The timing is suspicious. Yeah. Isn't it?
It is, and you're driving home through a country that's litter-strewn, that's broken, that is increasingly unrecognisable, that is becoming sectarianised. I've just come through the centre of Halifax on my way home, and there's another load of pro-Palestinian morons shouting, the usual anti-Semitic nonsense.
I know what you're coming through. What you're saying, Andrew, is a lot of people, including to an extent myself, we put a lot of hopes and dreams into Reform UK that they would sort this country out. That was the message they were giving us, and now we've just got this really ugly infighting. I agree with you. It's, to say the least, disappointing. Andrew, I've got to move on because I've got so many other calls, but excellent call. Thank you very much. Andrew in Halifax there. Let's go to my friend Mark in Watford. Hello, Mark. What do you make of all this?
I'm dismayed, Kevin. When I was speaking to Reform prospective MPs before the election, they spoke about a great new hope for us. I think we all had that hope, that we all pull in the direction for strong leadership in this country. And they're falling apart at the seams.
They are, aren't they? They are. This is a kind of self-harming destruction we're watching here, if you ask me. I mean, I hope they can get their act together, but they got a mountain to climb after this, haven't they?
They have. It's like an ego trip, Kevin, and it's such a shame because we are desperately crying out for guidance, much like America. The transformation in America in 6 weeks, 8 weeks is absolutely exactly what we're crying out for. And if we're not careful and we have this infighting, we're going to end up with that idiot the Labour Party Prime Minister in charge for years.
Do you think, Mark, I think this might be an apposite time for maybe Reform UK to at least start thinking about a merging of the right, because if the Tories and Reform UK could find some kind of common ground and get together, they can beat Starmer at the next election. In fact, they'd thrash him. So maybe with the backdrop of this unravelling, it might be time to think seriously about that. What do you reckon?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd always been a Tory voter. It was only that they lost their way that I went voting Reform to go back to basics, which I've spoken to you about before. Yeah. Certainly, sensible discussions now really do need to take place between the two parties. Need to get round the table and not think about themselves. That's the problem. There's too many selfish people there, and they're not putting the country first. They're putting the parties first.
Yeah, they are.
While that carries on, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, this is an ugly spectacle, but an astonishing story. Mark, always good to talk to you. Thanks, mate. Mark in Watford. Let's quickly go to Les in Cheshire. Hello, Les. What do you make of these quite spectacular events that have literally unfolded in the last 40 minutes or so?
Hi, Kev. Nice to speak to you. I think the Reform Party is going to implode. At the end of the day, you've got Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson, Rupert, Benabee, they're all appearing on channels throughout the network, especially on GB News. And what they're doing, they've got a job. The thing is, their job is they need to concentrate on the party and the party of the people to give a people's party rather than trying to put themselves up front on these channels.
Go on, Les. Let's go on. One last point, because I've got Rupert Lowe's response here, but make your last point, please.
Well, Rupert Lowe is a great advocate for the Reform Party, as is Benabee. But they've got some daggers to put in people's backs.
Yeah, well,
so at the end of the day, 28 MEPs was brought into the European Union, and we got out of
Okay, all right, well, good point, Les. Listen, I've got to go because I've got to read this statement, but thank you very much for a good call. That's Les in Cheshire. Listen, I think I better read, it's a massive statement. I won't read all of it, but Rupert Lowe has now issued his response to these extraordinary allegations against him that he harassed 2 women, made violent threats against Zia Youssef. Rupert Lowe's response: I am disappointed but not surprised to read Reform's untrue and false allegations. Let me be abundantly clear. This investigation is based on 0 credible evidence against me, as has been repeatedly stated by the neutral investigator. None has been provided. I have cooperated and spoken at length with the KC. They instructed at great cost to the party to investigate a minor staff matter. I have just spoken to the KC. She is dismayed that this statement has been made and reiterated that no evidence against me has been sent to her. She stated that this has been issued before the investigation has even started. In fairness, they did say that. They say they just instructed her. But Rupert Lowe goes on to say she is shocked at the process, shocked at the communication from the party, and shocked that no credible evidence has been given despite their repeated requests. It's a very long statement. I'll read you some more of it later in the show. Reform UK did say that Rupert Lowe has not cooperated at all. Well, inherently in this, he's saying that he has. So this massive bust-up gets more explosive by the moment. I'll read you some more of this statement later on. We better go to break now. We'll have a look at a different story after this, but we will be returning to these sensational developments as Ben Habib says we are witnessing the final unravelling of Reform UK. Do you think that is the case? I'd be very sad if that is the case. I hope it's not the case. What do you think? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to break. Back in a mo.
I mean, I'm pretty confident this war will end in the coming weeks, certainly by the spring, by the summer.
Okay.
I interpret the various statements by various parties, especially Sergei Lavrov's statement yesterday about the deployment of British and European security guarantee forces. They're not peacekeepers, would be an act of war. I see that as sort of the jousting before or as we go into negotiations.
Welcome back. James Sunderland, former Tory MP for Bracknell, is standing by. I'm just going to read a couple more important points from Rupert Lowe's response to the allegations by Reform UK that he harassed women, two women in his parliamentary office and his constituency office, and that he made physical threats of violence against the chairman, Zia Youssef. This is Rupert Lowe. He said, allegations of physical threats are outrageous and entirely untrue. I have never made any derogatory comments about women or those with disabilities. This is a lie. These allegations are not even referring to me. I will be seeking legal advice immediately. It is no surprise that this vexatious statement has been issued the day after my reasonable and constructive questions of Nigel and the reform structure. It was issued on X late on a Friday afternoon with no prior warning. Well, a warm welcome to the show to former Tory MP James Sunderland. Hello, James. Well, I was going to talk to you about something else, but there's only one story in town now. I mean, this is extraordinary. Your thoughts?
Yeah, hi, Kevin. Good afternoon. It's interesting. On the surface, what we've got here is an allegation of inappropriate behaviour of a serving member of Parliament. So if we follow the process in due course, it means there'll be an investigation. He should lose the whip, and there'll be a sanction applied if he's found guilty. But my instinct here is that dirty tricks are afoot and that all is not well in the Reform Party.
Yeah, I mean, I had Ben Habib on, the former deputy leader of the party. He quit back in December, kind of preempting what Rupert Lowe said a couple of days ago in the Daily Mail. Both of them basically questioned the sort of supreme leadership style of Nigel Farage. And Ben echoed what you just said. He said, I mean, none of us can know the veracity of these charges, but the timing is suspicious. And Ben said he had no doubt this was dirty tricks trying to undermine Rupert Lowe. That's basically what Rupert Lowe is saying. No surprise this vexatious statement has been issued the day after my reasonable and constructive questions of Nigel and the reform structure. So you've been around politics. This is the way it works sometimes, isn't it?
Sadly, I think it is. I mean, there's 5 MPs that Reform's got in Westminster. There's clearly a turf war going on. I've always found Rupert Lowe to be a good political commentator. He's an effective politician. He speaks a lot of sense. And again, as a centre-right conservative, former Conservative MP, I don't need Reform to tell me what I already know. But Rupert's a good operator. And I suspect that what you've got there is potentially a clash between Farage and Lowe. You've clearly got something going on, which is now breaking the news, and I suspect that that huge diversity of opinion within Reform, it's getting people in from all over the political spectrum. I suspect finding a common policy position is not going to be easy.
Yeah, going forward, I mean, Ben Habib said that he thought that this was the end of the Reform UK dream. I've got a switchboard here jammed with Reform supporters who are devastated by this. They too feel they are watching their beloved party unravel. Can Reform recover from this?
Well, look, if I'm being blunt and playing with a straight bat, the performance so far from Reform has been remarkable. They've got 5 MPs that performed very well at the last election. They're resonating with the public. And actually, as a Conservative, I think we've got a lot to learn from Reform. I think that, you know, as a centre-right politician, there is some sense in what they're saying. But my humble view on this is that whatever happens with Reform, it's imperative that the right doesn't continue going forward split. We have to work with Reform, learn from them. If they do implode, which I doubt, if they do implode, we're going to have to pick up the pieces from that as a Conservative Party. But I want to see a Conservative Party which is further to the right, which fulfills its promises, which fixes our borders, which stops illegal immigration. I'm a low tax, low state, low regulation Conservative. I serve my country and I also want it back. So I would hope that Reform do sort themselves out. We've got stuff to learn from Reform, but by the same token, it's imperative that the Conservative Party goes forward, having learnt the lessons of the past few years.
What you just stated that you want sounds like a kind of manifesto from Reform UK. But as I say, you do feel that, well, this is obviously an explosive moment, but you do feel that the Reform UK can recover and continue their project. I mean, their progress so far has been remarkable. I mean, people now talking, or they were until a few days ago, talking genuinely in terms of Reform UK potentially forming the next opposition, maybe even forming the next government. Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister. This is a derailment, to say the least, but you think not necessarily terminal?
I don't think it's terminal. I think these things happen in politics. Spats do happen. I suspect that they'll recover quite quickly. They've got to put themselves on a firm footing if they want to continue as a political party. They're going to have to organise themselves better. Their governance and their structures needs to improve. And the bottom line is that the Conservative Party needs to get better in order to make sure that we are occupying the territory that Reform is currently occupying, but be better, bolder and more competent. So I don't necessarily want to see Reform thrive, but what I do want to see is the right unite. Is this terminal now for the Reform Party? No, it's not. But I suspect that further spats will happen. And it's inevitable when you've got so many people coming across now from all across the political spectrum that they're not going to be able to agree on policy. That's where Conservative Party has to be better. We need to get our voters back.
Do you think, James, that it would be a good idea? I mean, at this moment of weakness, maybe Reform UK are reconsidering their options. Would this be a moment to think about possibly a merging of the right? Would you support Reform UK coming together with the Tories to form a formidable right-wing force that would definitely beat Labour at the next election? I think the problem, I think the fear we all have at the moment is that with a divided right, Starmer could sneak in again, and that's the last thing we want.
Kevin, I lost my seat in Bracknell, not because Labour necessarily beat me, but because the right was split. So 7,500 Reform voters, mainly Conservative voters moving across, and it cost me my job and my seat. So I've got a real interest in this. My personal view is that there will need to be a deal at some point. And what I mean by that is that actually we have got to work out how we avoid taking each other out in the future. We're going to have a Labour government at perpetuity for as long as Reform and the Conservatives keep doing damage to each other. And I suspect also that people have got a choice to make. Do they want to enable a Labour government for the next Parliament by voting Reform, or do they come back to a reformed Conservative Party? My view is that we're not going to do a deal with Reform necessarily. The Conservative Party is the oldest and most successful political party in the world, but we have got to learn lessons from the past. We have got to accept that the promises we made, we didn't deliver. We have got to sort immigration out and our borders out. We've got to get our country back. And I think that Reform voters will come back to the Conservative Party if we get our own house in order.
James, you were an excellent MP for Bracknell. My sister lives there, and I know a lot of people have got a high regard for you. Will you fight for that seat again the next election?
I'd like to. If I'm being very candid now, I'm the worst nightmare for Labour. Labour couldn't lay a glove on me at all at the last election. Again, they didn't win it, we lost it. And Reform likewise. I mean, Reform voters in Bracknell know that I'm a former army colonel. I fought for my country. I want secure borders. I want law and order. I want security. So my politics is very much aligned to where many Reform voters are. So do I want to go again? Absolutely yes. And I hope that the current MP is not unpacking his bags.
That's good to hear, James. Parliament needs people like you. Great to talk. Thank you so much. That's James Sunderland, former Tory MP for Bracknell and wannabe future MP for Bracknell as well. Good luck to him. Now, as you know, we've got this sensational story unfolding. Harry Cole, who spoke to Nigel Farage on this show last night, will join me after the news, after the 6 o'clock news, with his thoughts on what we're witnessing literally as we speak, as we watch Reform UK apparently like unravelling, falling apart at the seams. So Harry Cole next. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. Well, unfolding before our very eyes is a sensational story as what Ben Habib described as the end of the Reform UK party that is unravelling at the seams. Now, this all dates back to Rupert Lowe a couple of days ago in the Daily Mail saying that Nigel Farage has a messiah complex and that the party was little more than a protest group. Nigel Farage responded to Harry Cole in this very seat this time last night in no uncertain terms. And earlier in this show, I had Ben Habib, the former deputy leader of Reform UK, giving his thoughts on what's happening. He echoed what Rupert Lowe said, and essentially said that Nigel Farage's leadership style will be the death of Reform UK's dream. So before Harry Cole comes on with his thoughts, he is, of course, apart from being an esteemed presenter now here on Talk, is, of course, the excellent political editor of The Sun newspaper, part of this company. Before Harry comes on, let's remind ourselves first of Nigel Farage speaking to him on this very show this time last night.
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Rupert Lowe, will he still be a Reform MP by the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I hope so, but he seems to be taking a tone that says he might not accept us, but there you are.
Just remarkable. Now, just an hour ago, I mean, literally this astonishing story broke as I was about to interview Ben Habib, so we tackled it in real time, if you like. Here's what Ben had to say about these remarkable developments.
Well, I'm afraid that is a declaration of war on Rupert Lowe. I don't know the circumstances to which they refer, but I am 99% certain it's all trumped-up nonsense. They talk about high qualities of standard in public discourse. Lee Anderson, in response to a perfectly civil tweet from me the other day, absolutely went for me in an ad hominem way on Twitter, which is frankly unforgivable, in my view, for any MP to act that way.
Well, there you are. Now, the man in question who interviewed Nigel Farage this time last night in this very seat is the great political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. Welcome to the show, Harry. I mean, oh my God, your thoughts?
Well, look, you got me on Talk wearing my gym kit. That's how big a story it is.
Looking good, man. Looking good.
Just phenomenal. Like,
what did you do at the gym? Have a coffee and a sandwich?
Yeah, exactly. Really lovely cappuccinos.
Go on, mate. So, what do you think? What do you think?
I said yesterday that the path of Nigel Farage and UKIP and the Brexit Party and Reform is littered with people who have crossed Nigel Farage, but it was clear yesterday that he wasn't quite saying. There was something more to his what was going on, and now we know, I think, what it is. He was. I was so surprised to see him actually go so hard for one of his own MPs that, on the surface of things, was a key member of his admittedly small cohort of MPs. But now we know. Behind the scenes, ever since last week, really, there's been this sort of internal battle going on. Now, Rupert Lowe has come out and hit back very hard in the last sort of 25 minutes or so and said, look, I've been raising concerns about Nigel's leadership. And lo and behold, this is what happens when you do that. And then he gave that very incendiary interview to Andrew Pearce of the Daily Mail earlier in the week. And then you saw Farage's public response to that yesterday. So what we're really seeing is it exploding now into the public domain, that there's always something a little bit more complicated than just public sort of trading of blows, as we've seen. And, well, look, the statements speak for themselves. The suggestion that he's made threats of physical violence towards the
chairman, Zia Yousaf,
yeah. Which he has strongly denied tonight. And then he said, look, this is an internal HR matter that's been blown out of all proportion. Now, speaking to Reform insiders in the last half an hour or so, they said, well, look, that's actually quite serious. And the allegations have been made by a very credible source, someone who's been worked in Parliament for a very long time. It isn't as simple as the fact. It isn't just an inter-office dispute, and actually concerns have been felt since the election about Rupert Lowe. Obviously, we saw at Christmas these tensions come to a bit of a head when Elon Musk suddenly declared that Nigel Farage didn't have what it takes to be the leader of Reform and was looking very closely at Rupert Lowe. So that was the first sort of hint we saw of this battle. But I think it has been going on for a little bit longer. And then you had Ben Habib on the show before. Obviously, a man who left Reform when Nigel Farage came back last summer unexpectedly to take the reins of the party once again. No fan of Nigel, it has to be said, and very much of the sort of Rupert Lowe camp. But this is not good for Reform. They are ahead in the polls, if you look at some of them. They've only got 5 MPs, a five-a-side football team, essentially. You can fit their entire parliamentary cohort in a black cab. And if this is the level of sort of battle between them, I think people are going to look at this and go, hang on, what's going on? We wanted something different. We wanted a bit of change. We didn't want the old Tory party that spent 14 years ripping each other's throats apart. Labour, obviously, is not the change that people who voted for them perhaps expected at the election. They were having a good, hard look at Reform as something different. And I don't know whether this is going to be a major setback for them or, once again, yet another party battle where someone has come for Nigel Farage, and it's happened before. It's happened so many times in UKIP that someone thinks they can do a better job. From people from Robert Kilroy Silk to I'm stretching the memories now. But there have been multiple people who've decided that Nigel Farage isn't the best thing for UKIP or for Reform, and have decided to come for him, and it hasn't gone well for them.
Yeah.
Look, we have to see how the sort of dust settles, but very serious allegations made publicly, so they are actionable should they be incorrect. And Rupert Lowe says he's consulting lawyers tonight. I do think this probably sounds like there's probably something a little bit more than just your classic inter-party battle, because the level of these allegations and the seriousness of them, and getting the police involved, would suggest that the party machine, led by Zia Youssef, the chairman, have some serious concerns.
Well, this is a slightly banal question, but shouldn't Reform UK by now have removed the whip from Mr. Lowe?
Yes, they have a chief whip. That's Lee Anderson. His name is on the statement. There's a line in Lowe's statement where he said, look, Reform is bigger than Nigel. If they want to get rid of me, they can try, but I'm not going anywhere. So he's bedding in and saying, well, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to walk away. I think that's the obvious question. That's what the Tories are saying tonight. That's, I imagine, what we'll see from the Labour Party in the next hour or so. Of, well, this is as serious as you say. How can you have this person representing you under your banner? Now, look, I think that's probably the first thing you'd say about one of the older parties with the establishment of Whip's office. But again, the party with only 5 MPs, he's been elected under the Reform banner. Suspending the whip, what does it actually mean? Do they actually have a proper whipping structure? Yeah. We don't really know, but that is obviously where the story is going to go next. And I think that will be the pressure will be on the Faragistas, should we call them? Yeah. The sort of the reformers that are still the anti Rupert Lowe block of the party. I suspect they will take a lot of questions on that and feel a lot of heat for that. But what's really interesting about Rupert Lowe is that he has been a very articulate, very interesting guy who's been raising the profile of him, not only himself, but of the party. He's obviously caught the attention of Elon Musk on the grooming gangs. He's been very strong on immigration. And I do wonder whether perhaps there's a bit of a policy dispute as well going on in the fact that some people within Reform think that Farage perhaps could go harder on immigration. Obviously, he's trying to build the biggest base possible, the biggest sort of voter block offering to the voters ahead of the local elections, ahead of the Welsh and Scottish elections next year, and then of course ahead of the next general election. Whereas a strand of Reform think they've actually gone a bit soft on immigration, and actually they could go a lot harder. And then there's also that eternal question that's bugged Nigel Farage for years about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson joined UKIP, and that's when Nigel Farage said, you know what, that party's dead. I'm going to go and do my own new thing.
Yeah.
And Rupert Lowe has been quite vocal about the Tommy Robinson cause. He hasn't said free Tommy, etc., but he has been highlighting the conditions that Tommy Robinson has been held in. That's caused a real rift internally within Reform, because they know that actually for a vast number of voters, Tommy Robinson is toxic. Yeah. He's a thug. He's in prison for contempt of court. So it's not that he's some sort of political hero or political prisoner, but there is a strand of Reform voter who think they could be a lot harder on this stuff.
Yeah, this is extraordinary stuff, Harry, and thank you very much for breaking off from your gym session and telling us how it is. Thanks very much to Harry Cole, the excellent political editor of The Sun and a presenter here now. Let's go straight over now to a former Reform UK communications chief who's been waiting patiently, Gawain Towler. Hi, Gawain.
Hi there.
Much going on.
Just a bit.
Yeah,
I'm just about to give a speech to 250 loyal Reform members in Norfolk, in the beautiful Norfolk countryside. But I'd like to say one thing in following up what Harry was saying there. I can confirm that the whip has been removed.
Oh, it has now. Okay, well that's breaking news. The whip has now been removed from Reform UK. I think that was the only logical thing to do under the circumstances. Well, what are your thoughts, Gawain? Did you know about this developing explosive situation?
Well, I was aware that we've now read both the Reform statement and Rupert's statement. I was aware that there was a staffing issue. I didn't know what it was, and then of course Rupert wrote his piece in the Mail, and I think the timeline suggests that the piece or the interview he gave to the Mail is post him receiving the letter. And I think he's trying. It looks to me as if he's trying to get his retaliation in first with that article.
So that's important. Just sorry to stop you, but that's very important. So you believe the chronology is that these allegations about Rupert Lowe's behaviour came before he gave that explosive interview to the Daily Mail?
I believe that to be the case, yes. Because he admits in his Twitter post that he received the letter on Friday. And I believe that the interview was done post that.
So you would reject then the charge. Ben Habib was on earlier. He said this smacks to him of typical Lowe politics, trying to undermine Rupert Lowe.
You used the term Lowe politics.
Yeah. Well, politics are low, aren't they? So, but you know what I'm saying. You would reject that allegation.
No, I think Ben has been going on a one-man crusade against Nigel now ever since Nigel removed him as deputy leader, and he couldn't have been deputy leader because he didn't get elected. The drive towards democratisation is ongoing. The drive towards professionalisation is ongoing. The demands and requirements Rupert made in his interview with Andrew Pearce were things that were happening anyhow. It's sort of, we want to get policies. Well, yeah, but we've also creating the structure. We can't do everything at once. We don't have that many resources. You've got to do one, get the structure going, fight the council elections. I remember back in September, people were talking about creating policy platforms, and Nigel turned and said, look, go ahead, do the work, don't come to me until March, because there's so much else we're trying to do. We don't have the capacity. And the idea that that isn't going on is for the birds. It's just a shame that this... I didn't know the details that we've just learned from the Reform statement, of course, when I read Rupert's article. But I just read it and thought, but this is happening. It's already happening. It's as if you're shouting about something that's actually taking place. And I was deeply disappointed. And I think whilst I'm going to be speaking, as I say, to 250 people, the mood was great 20 minutes, half an hour ago.
It's not so good. What are you going to say to them?
Let's see what it's like when I stand up on stage.
Yeah, good luck with that. What are you going to tell them, though? Because
I'm going to tell them what's happened.
I've got a switchboard here, Gawain. I've got to tell you, I've got a switchboard here, absolutely jam-packed with people, with Reform UK supporters who are devastated by this. So what are you going to tell your audience?
Rupert can be a great asset, and he is a great asset. He does like to make policy on the hoof if he can get away with it, but he is a great asset, and many of the things that Harry was saying is entirely true. He is a great asset, he's a great communicator, and he's somebody I'd far prefer to have on side, working with the team. Of course I would. And I think even Nigel said that yesterday. But sometimes linen is dirty, but you don't wash it in public.
Yeah, well, it's very much being watched in public right now. Can Reform UK recover from this?
Nigel's, as Harry said, there have been differences in character and personalities over the years, and every time he comes back stronger.
Last question. I know you've got to go and address the faithful. I wish I was there. I'd love to see your speech. Ben Habib has just tweeted that Zia Youssef should be sacked. Your response?
Well, Ben's been saying that for months. It's getting rather boring. I'm sorry, he just has. He just has. He's been saying it for months and months and months, and it's he's loving this, of course. he's stirring the pot as quickly as he can. I love Benzin. This time a year ago, we were in Wellington fighting the by-election together on his behalf. I love him dearly, but I think he's enjoying these local difficulties a little bit too much.
And what's going to be the first line of your speech? Have you rewritten it?
Good evening. An absolute delight to see you all here just outside Norwich.
Yeah, it's been a quiet day. Gawain, well, good luck with the speech. You're going to need it. Thank you very much for talking to us. Excellent stuff. That's Gawain Towler, a former Reform UK communications speech, who's about to make a speech to 250 of the party faithful, who I think are very, very shaken at the moment. We're going to stick with this story. When we come back, we're going to talk to Pete Barnes, political strategist, fervent Tory. He's usually my Friday friend on my evening show, The Political Asylum, on Friday night from 7 until 9 p.m. But I thought we'd get on earlier. I bet he's having a great time about this. So we'll talk to Pete Barnes next. We're going to take more of your calls later. Keep them coming in. As I say, this story has unfolded before our very eyes ever since 5 o'clock. Just remarkable. Stay tuned for more.
Can you get rid of these rats?
100%. 100%.
How would you do it?
Because I know that they're coming from the sewers. The problem here is the water authorities. 99 out of 100.
But just briefly, Christian, how would you get rid of them? Do you have to kill them? Would you lead them away with a Pied Piper? What do you do?
Kind of. It's a sensible system. You put that in the broken pipe.
Yeah.
The rats go through there. You poo and water goes through there. The rats, when they try to come back out of the sewer system, can't go through the flap.
Welcome back. We are experiencing one of the great political stories of all time, a massive fallout. Reform UK now accusing its own MP. While I say that, I'll update you of that in just a second. Rupert Lowe of harassing women in his political offices and making threats of violence against the party chairman Zia Yusuf. And Zia Yusuf has apparently reported him to the police. Rupert Lowe denying all these charges, suggesting typical political dirty tricks, undermining him because 2 days ago he gave an interview to the Daily Mail saying that Nigel Farage suffered from a messiah complex and the Reform UK was little more than a protest group. But we now understand that the chronology of this, that it started when these complaints by Reform UK went in on Friday. So the charge is that Rupert Lowe allegedly gave this interview in response to the fact there have been these complaints about his behaviour. And now we have just heard that the whip, the Reform whip, has been taken away from Reform UK, former Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe, who now stands in Parliament as an independent. So it's all going on. Pete Barnes, political strategist, is standing by with his thoughts. If I know him, he's breaking out the champagne right now. But let's first of all talk to Chris in Cambridgeshire. Hello, Chris. What do you make of all this?
Well, basically, I've followed it since you started on it earlier. And I smelt a rat at the beginning. It didn't ring right. And it's now beginning to come out. Yeah, the timeline is beginning to show the truth.
Yeah.
And that is that the party was doing what it was doing, and he's responded to them rather than the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, that appears to be. I mean, this isn't written in stone, but as we understand it, these complaints about Rupert Lowe's alleged behaviour kind of emerged, went in, became official last Friday. So arguably, it's just speculation, of course, Rupert Lowe gave that interview to the Daily Mail, to Andrew Pearce at the Mail, in response to that. And now, of course, Reform UK have responded again with this explosive statement. He's released an explosive statement. I mean, it's politics at its very worst, at its very most compelling as well. But what do you make of it all? Do you think it's all low politics, or that there's something in this?
No, I think one of the biggest problems is when you have a new party, everybody that joins at the early part always thinks they'd like to be the leader. But you can only have one leader.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you have to sort out who that's going to be and stick to it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I said, Chris. I don't think political parties, ironically, counterintuitively, shouldn't be that democratic. They need a leader, and everybody needs to follow the leader. Exactly. That way you get unity. You get unity.
Yeah. That's right.
Chris, listen, I've got to move on. It's always good to talk to you, though. Thank you for your excellent observations. Chris in Cambridgeshire there. And now I can just about hear the pops, the champagne corks popping. Let's go over to political strategist Pete Barnes. Hello, Pete. Bet you're loving this, aren't you?
You know, just sort of seriously, if any of these allegations are true, they should be investigated and dealt with by the police and all of that. You know, we'd have to take this stuff seriously.
Yeah, sure.
As we deal with the politics. But I have to admit, a small part of me read that article from Rupert Lowe and thought, my God, he's just done what many people have dedicated their lives doing, and he did it in one article. And that was take Nigel Farage off the table. I mean, that interview was devastating. He doesn't think he's got the skills to deliver that. There's not many politicians of any skill that can come back from an accusation like that, calling him a messiah. I mean, there was a real personal streak in that interview, I have to admit. But the way I read it, and now understanding as we do the timeline, I always thought that this was more that Rupert Lowe was a little sick and tired of the circus that follows Farage. You know, I get the feeling that he's a lot more of a policy guy. He wants to fix things. As I always get the feeling that Nigel Farage and a lot of his followers just want to blow things up. You know, and I think this is where kind of the Ben Habib kind of situation kind of falls into where me and he disagree. But I have to admit, that, you know, this idea that Rupert's done it in response to, I'm not so sure. It does have a whiff of Westminster Games.
Well, if the chronology is accurate, and that these allegations against Rupert Lowe emerged on Friday, Friday. You know, this KC, the King's Council, apparently a female King's Council was engaged then, that the complaints went into the parliamentary authorities on Friday. You could speculate quite reasonably that Rupert Lowe responded, you know, in a state of high dudgeon by giving this interview. And now, of course, Reform UK have responded again with this explosive statement accusing him of harassing women and threatening Zia Youssef. And of course, he's responded with his equally explosive response. I mean, are we witnessing the last days of the Raj here? Can Reform UK recover from this?
Annoyingly, I would say yes, because no, because I actually think all it needs to do is for Nigel to go. I mean, I listened to what Harry Cole was when he was interviewing then. He said, like, there were multiple people that have come for him. Have you not noticed that there is a pattern of behaviour here? That you come for Nigel and you're the one that's on the way out. Yet people always keep going for him. I don't think, as Chris was just saying, that it's about people wanting to be the leader. I think it's people actually wanting to take the movement in a different direction. And Nigel can't let go of the movement. I mean, there's been a regular criticism of mine for quite some time of Nigel, is that whilst I agree with what he's saying, he's the wrong messenger. And I do think that Rupert had kind of clocked on to this point, and he was saying that, look, we've got to get serious, we've got to have some policy, we've got to know how we're fixing things. The media circus and the headline grabbing is one thing, but actually fixing the country, which Rupert got into politics to do, you know, is the most important thing. And I think this was the point, and they must have got a whiff about what he was going to say in this interview, and you know, it could be put this way, that they put these allegations in on Friday knowing what was going to be said, so you could play it both ways. But that's the problem. They're now playing an optics game, and that's a huge problem.
A very, very bad optics game. I mean, this is ugly to see. I mean, it's very compelling for people like me, journalists, and probably yourself as well. It's just fascinating to watch, but it's not good for Reform, is it?
No, it's not, because the one thing the public will look at is a party in complete disarray. And that is a killer. The public do not vote for a party that can't get its house in order. You look at the disarray of the Tories and the Labour Party in their equal elections, and you know, and they never got anywhere. It's because what was it? Lincoln said, "A house divided cannot stand," and that's the point. The Reform Party has always had this schism between the Faragists and the people that really are the real Conservatives. And I do think we're now starting to see that clash together.
Indeed. Well, Pete, the good news is, though, we've got tonight off, so...
Yeah, I know. I was having a lovely evening, I'm not going to lie, and then this happened.
Well, yeah, you could return to your lovely evening, because you won't have to join me later on. Always good to talk to you. I'll see you next week, Pete. That's Pete Barnes, political strategist. When we come back, there are other stories going on, and I do think it's very important we take a look at exactly what's going on in terms of Trump, Zelensky, America, Russia, Ukraine. There are talks on Monday in Saudi Arabia between Zelensky and the States. The peace drive continues apace. And Trump, I think, in a bid to prove to the world that he's not going to bend over for Putin, has just issued a serious threat against Putin, talking about large-scale sanctions, tariffs, as he demands that Russia and Ukraine get round the table now, because Russia now seem to be slightly reluctant about all this. So Trump is strong-arming Russia now. So it's all fascinating stuff. We'll talk about this after the break, and then after the following break, we'll come back to Reform UK. Keep your calls coming in. I'll take some more of your calls a little bit later on all of this. So what a show. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, listen, we're going to talk about Ukraine, America, Russia, the peace talks between Zelensky and America in Saudi Arabia on Monday. As Zelensky basically climbs down, he's willing pretty much now to accept anything that Donald Trump tells him. Trump now appears to be putting Russia and Putin in the same position. I think Donald is very keen to stress to the world he is not going to favour Russia. He has now threatened Putin with sanctions and tariffs unless Russia starts agreeing to a ceasefire and a peace agreement as well. So it's all going on over in the States. Meanwhile, of course, the useless EU leaders and our equally useless British leader, Keir Starmer, are all conflabbing, talking about getting together their defence budgets because all of a sudden, oh my God, they've realised they've got to defend themselves and maybe America won't help them anymore. Oh dear. Let's go straight over to the States and talk to former American diplomat, foreign policy advisor for the Republican leadership in the US Senate, Jim Jatras. Jim, welcome to the show. Thank you for hanging on.
Thank you, Kevin. Great being here with you.
Your thoughts, as I say, Donald Trump this time last week, of course, with that explosive meeting in the Oval Office where he turned his sights on Zelensky and basically said, you do what I say, you don't have any of the cards, and you pursue peace, or America completely pulls out of the European picture. It looks like, Zelensky has spent the week climbing down, just saying sorry, basically saying sorry. Donald Trump said he has actually apologised in a letter, so that's going on. But now Donald Trump has turned his sights on Russia, and said, I need you to start playing the game as well. Donald Trump is really forcing this peace drive through. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier he doesn't want it to look like he's siding with the Russians. So I think this is just atmospheric. I don't think the Russians give a damn about a sanctions threat at this point. They've been piled on with all the sanctions we got to throw at them, and it doesn't make any difference. So I think what he's trying to do is to show, as you say, that Zelensky doesn't have any cards, the Europeans don't have any cards, and that the Russians hold a lot of cards. The question is whether they will go for a ceasefire, which they've said they will not do in the absence of a durable permanent settlement. And I think that's the real question mark right now.
And their other demand is that, or as things stand right now, is Putin is demanding that he retains the territory that he's gained so far. Would you think that will be acceptable to Zelensky, or does he have any choice in the matter? Will that, more to the point, will that be acceptable to Donald Trump?
Yeah, it is more to the point, because it doesn't matter what Zelensky and the Ukrainians will accept.
Stupid question.
This is between the Americans and the Russians. Look, Putin said in June of last year that he demands not only the 4 oblasts plus Crimea that the Russians now hold, but also the constitutional limits of those oblasts, which include the cities of Zaporozhye and Kherson, which the Ukrainians still hold. And he's saying the Ukrainians have to vacate those areas. So not only will he hold on to everything he has, he wants more and may take more unless there is a ceasefire, which the Russians say they will not agree to in the absence of a durable, broader peace settlement.
And Donald Trump and America will want to, as we alluded to earlier in this conversation, they'll want to make sure that it doesn't look as if they've sort of caved into everything that Putin wants. Do you think Putin is negotiable on this, in these areas?
I don't know, to tell the truth, Kevin. My sources who have good ears in Moscow tell me opposite things, that there are people around Putin, including probably he himself, who would rather go for a quarter of a loaf and a peace settlement early, rather than say, fine, if you won't give us what we want, we'll just press on militarily, which I think, frankly, is where the majority of the Russian public is. So I don't know that Trump could accept terms that would actually work on the Russian side.
At this stage, America has not only withdrawn military support, military aid to Ukraine, more significantly, was it yesterday, they withdrew intelligence cooperation, and without that intelligence, Ukraine is unable to fire its American missiles, which are its main attack vessels on Ukraine. So Ukraine right now stands somewhat neutered, somewhat impotent in this war. That must be, shall we say, very motivating to Zelensky right now.
Well, but as you say, now that Zelensky has come crawling back and agreed to all the Trump's terms about the rare earths and all that sort of thing, which frankly I think is a meaningless agreement, does then Trump turn the spigot back on to say, okay, fine, you met my terms, now you can have this back? And the other question is, does he cut off Starlink and other electronics that would prevent them from using their drones, which is really the most important thing to the Ukrainians right now militarily?
You said that you think that the rare earth mineral deal is something of a red herring. A lot of people think that if Donald signs that deal, that will mean America has skin in the Ukrainian game. Americans will be working in Ukraine, and in that respect, that would mean that Putin wouldn't dare go near Ukraine again. So why would you say that that deal is a red herring?
Well, because if I were Zelensky, that's why I would have signed the deal in the White House when he was there last week, instead of waiting all this time. But again, the reason that I think it's a red herring is, first off, I think apparently a lot of promises were made to the British on the very same resources already. So he's double promising things. Two, a lot of those resources are in the areas held by the Russians. Three, they're very deep underground, very expensive, and to exploit. A lot of people really discount whether they're really exploitable in the very near future, if at all. So I think it's mostly just for show.
What do you think of Zelensky's behaviour over the past week? I mean, I couldn't give a damn whether or not J.D. Vance and Donald Trump bullied him in the office. You know, this he's a grown man. He's led his country through a hellish war for 3 years. I think he can stand a little bit of nasty, hurty words in the Oval Office. I couldn't give a damn about that. He seems to regret that contretemps now. As you say, as we've both agreed, he's been crawling back ever since. A lot of people in Ukraine saying he has to go. What do you think about his behaviour?
Hey, look, he's an actor. Look, the idea that somehow he's really the president, even though his constitutional term has expired, and that he has any agency, is absurd. He is the face and a voice of the people who put him in power, which not only means the nationalist groups in Kiev, but also means the CIA and MI6. And he will be there as long as they want him there. And they will do what he's told to do.
Okay. By the way, I think that Europe, including my country, we owe Donald Trump a debt of gratitude because he's woken us up. I am watching now these hopeless, dysfunctional, sclerotic EU leaders all meeting saying, oh, I think we can get together 615 billion euros for our, you know, it's like these people go, oh my God, that includes our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, by the way, going, oh my God, we're going to have to pay for our own defence. It's a pathetically embarrassing spectacle, isn't it?
It really, I think pathetic is the term that comes to everybody's mind. They act like they really matter anymore, and they don't. Even if they wanted to spend all this money, and frankly, I don't think they have it, it would take them years, if not decades, to build up a serious military capability. Everybody knows this. The Russians know this. The Americans know this.
Yeah. And of course, our Prime Minister, who seems to think he's like that with the President, you know, that they're great buddies. Are they hell?
He's the new leader. He's the new leader of the free world, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he thinks to use his voice, oh, I'm the bridge between Europe and America. I think Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, quite rightly in my view, view him as exactly the same as the EU leaders, weak and woke. So this friendship is performative, to say the least. And the truth of the matter is that unless America keeps providing support to Ukraine, Europe won't get their act together. They will not be able to go it alone. Am I right?
I think that's entirely right. And it then really boils down to what can be done between the Russians and the Americans. And that largely means, how much does Trump want to get dragged in to this war so it becomes his war rather than Biden's war, when in fact militarily we don't hold a lot of cards either. We've sent a lot of equipment, a lot of money to Ukraine. There's not much else we can do unless somehow the Ukrainians are willing to sue for peace, and it doesn't look like they're willing to do it, or we don't know if the Americans will either. In that case, the Russians will just keep moving forward.
And a last point, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. This counterintuitive situation where you have, right-wing people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, maybe yourself as well, maybe even slightly me, saying, end this war. We don't want to see hundreds of thousands of young men dying in horrific circumstances in frozen fields in the east. And then you got all these left-wing European liberals going, oh no, let's carry on. I saw the Danish Prime Minister, some woman going, oh, we've got to carry on fighting. We've got to carry this war on, otherwise we'll lose. I mean, what's going on here? Why is it that the left want this war and destruction to continue, but the right want it to end?
I worked at the Soviet desk at the State Department during Reagan's years, and in those days, nobody was anywhere near as anti-Soviet as they are anti-Russian today. I think a lot of these lefties felt a kind of a comradeship with their friends in the Kremlin when it was run by the communists. Now that it's not, now that it's a national state, it even has a kind of a Christian ethos to it, they really, really hate it. For the same reason they hate their own people. They hate Donald Trump. They hate the English people, the French people, the German people, because they like all this woke, red, commie stuff that they miss so much.
Well, a lot of us here in this country, Jim, hope that President Trump succeeds in his drive for peace. It was very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Jim Jashrassy, former US diplomat, foreign policy advisor to the Republican leadership in the US Senate. Now, we're going to go back to a break now. And I was going to say you can give us a call about that, but frankly, we're going to stick with Reform UK. So after the break, we're going to go back to the phones and take your calls on this incredible falling out that we've witnessed on this show in the last 2 dramatic hours. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Your calls next. Stay tuned.
It is, and it's time for employers to get with the programme about this. We've had a series of court cases. NHS Fife versus Peggy is going on right now, in which tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money is being used to defend these insane cases where employers try to compel the speech of their employees. They don't have the right to do that. It's not kind and respectful to compel people's speech, and it's particularly dangerous for women and girls for whom sex recognition is really, really important.
Welcome back. I should tell you the lineup for tonight on Talk. It's not me. Next at 7 p.m. It's going to be Mike Graham's Plank of the Week. Great show. Tune into that. That's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham at 7 o'clock. Then Grumpy Old Men with me and Mike Graham and Mark Wogan. I don't know why I'm on it. I mean, I'm neither grumpy nor old, am I? What do you mean I am? Anyway, that's at 8 p.m. And then the show, the most incredible programme. It's called What Just Happened? What Just Happened? Starring me. So What Just Happened, my show, is on at 9 p.m. So that's your lineup for tonight. And I believe James Whale is on after that. James Whale is on at 10. So pretty good show. James will be all over this story, I'll tell you. So Plank of the Week next. Grumpy Old Men at 8. What Just Happened at 9. James Whale at 10. Come on. How good is that? But let's go back to the phones. First of all, Paul, who's a new caller, always like a new caller. Hello, Paul. Don't make this your last call. You're in Mansfield. What would you like to say?
Hi, Kev. Great show as normal.
Thank you.
Nobody seems to be seeing the bigger picture of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, go
on. To me, the Labour Party and the Conservatives are so terrified of reform getting in. I think there's dark political forces behind this. I think it's a complete stitch-up.
Okay. I mean, how would Labour and the Tories be responsible for these allegations against Rupert Lowe? They emerged, we're told, on Friday, and the allegations seem to be being made by Reform UK. In fact, they are being made by Reform UK. The chairman of Reform UK, Zia Yousaf, says that Rupert Lowe threatened him physically, and he's reported the matter to the police. Rupert Lowe, of course, denies this. How would Labour and the Tories be responsible for that?
They're so terrified, I believe.
Yeah, but how would they be responsible? That's the chairman of Reform UK saying that. That's nothing to do with Labour or the Tories. I know what you mean. There are always dirty tricks at play, but I do believe this is an internal problem for Reform UK. Nothing to do with the Tories or Labour.
They're just out to discredit Nigel and discredit the Reform.
Who are?
The Labour and the Conservatives.
Well, no, but this is Reform UK. It's not them, is it? It's not the Tories or Labour.
Yeah, but
this is Reform UK, if you like, discrediting themselves. They are at war with each other. Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe slinging dirt at each other.
Yeah. Well,
it's them, Paul. It's them.
There seems to be a leadership problem.
Yeah, well, that's as maybe. Yeah, well, that's exactly what Rupert. Yeah. Well, listen, Paul, I take your point. Yes, the Tories and Labour do want to discredit Reform UK, but in this instance, it's nothing to do with them. Reform UK are self-harming here. I'm afraid that is the case. Good call, though, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul in Mansfield there. Rupert Lowe has just posted on X reports suggesting that the police received the complaint yesterday. This will be the complaint by the Reform UK chairman, Zia Youssef. Reports are suggesting that the police received the complaint yesterday relating to an event in December. The complaint obviously went in just after I asked reasonable questions of Reform's leadership, a malicious attempt to drag my name through the mud. So the timing of all this is at the key. It's at the centre of this. Rupert Lowe saying that this, that's at least, I'm not sure which one, relating to an event in December, that the complaints have just gone in. So he's arguing that they weaponised an old event in order to undermine him. Again, Rupert Lowe denies all these allegations, but extraordinary stuff, folks, extraordinary stuff. Let's go to, she's one of my regular callers. Always good to talk to her. It's Georgina in London. Hi, Georgina. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's more exciting than Meghan Markle's.
Well, that much we agree on.
Holy grail. Well, I think that the best form of attack is defence, and Rupert Lowe put his defence in, or the start of it, when he did the interview with the Mirror. I think...
With the Mail.
Oh, the Mail. I don't read any of them. Anyway, I really do think that unity is strength within a party, and I think it's best to treat the rot earlier rather than later. There's a lot of testosterone flying ground in Reform UK at the moment.
Well, they're all blokes, aren't they, in Parliament anyway?
Everybody wants to be king, but unfortunately, with a political party, you can only have one king, and the media are loving this, the Labour are loving this, Conservatives. They're going to put more spin on this than Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
It's really, I am loving this transparency in politics, and the fact that Nigel made a statement to say, look, there's an investigation underway. We don't know really.
Well, actually, Georgina, he didn't. Interestingly, the statement came from Lee Anderson, who is the Reform Party whip, and Zia Youssef, the Reform Party chairman. Nigel Farage has been nowhere to be seen.
Right, well...
It's interesting.
I'm glad it's come out now, anyway.
There's nothing wrong with that. I agree with that. Transparency is always good.
It's brilliant, a little Trumpology going in there. I mean, at the end of the day, Nigel has done a fantastic job up to now. He has got an absolutely massive following, and this little blip in the road will soon be sorted. It's not exactly the Profumo scandal, I mean, let's face it, he's got to do a lot to catch up with Labour and their scandals. We could go on all night talking about them. This is a little blip, and it will get sorted, but best now than later.
Yeah, you're probably right, because as they say, a week is a long time in politics, and people do forget this kind of thing, but we'll see what plays out in the week to come. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Georgina, thank you for another excellent call. Very, very quickly, you haven't got long, David, sorry, but David in London.
Story of my life, I haven't got long. Look, at the moment, I've just checked on our membership reform, 220,000.
Right.
Which is 100,000 more than the Tories and about 80,000 less than Labour. At the end of the day, look, we expected this to happen. It's just come about a strange way, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's come about a very strange... We were expecting this. However, I would say I've known Nigel Farage, not closely, but I've known about him for at least 11 years since I was a UKIP man and everything else.
Yeah.
He doesn't really like people too close to him to take away too much limelight. I'll just say three names: Ben Habib, Stephen Wolfe and David Ball. And at the end of the day, those three are all excellent people and all ought to be at the top with Nigel, but they're not, are they?
Well, no, I mean, I think that I mean, the Reform UK dynamic, if you like, it revolves around Nigel Farage, and I don't think that's any bad thing. He's a very charismatic man. He has all the right instincts, and people are drawn to him. That's why he is responsible for Reform UK's remarkable progress, and I hope he continues. But do you think they can, very quickly, David, can they recover from this?
It's not a problem, is it? Look,
well, it is at the moment.
220,000 members now.
Yeah.
I watched Question Time last night.
I did too.
Digging all the time at Reform. They're terrified. I spoke to a senior Tory only yesterday. He said to me the Tories have got no policies. They don't really think this leader they've got now is any good. Labour